Welcome to my Substack series, Stolen Seas, Coexistence is Not an Option.
So Nova Scotia is gearing up for this massive leap into offshore wind and green hydrogen. It's being sold to us as this incredibly bold step into a green future for all of Canada. But, when you start to follow the money, a very different story begins to unfold. And it raises some pretty serious questions about who really stands to benefit from all this. Let's dig in. Okay, so the official story, the one we're all meant to hear, is incredibly ambitious. The government is painting this picture of Nova Scotia as a clean energy superpower. They're calling it a truly transformative project for the entire country. And you gotta admit, it's a powerful and really inspiring narrative. And pay attention to the language here, because it's really key. You hear phrases like truly transformative and clean energy superpower, and that sets some massive expectations. This is the promise that's been made to the public, right? It's framed as this huge national project for energy independence and for climate action. But is that what's really going on? Now this is where the story takes a really sharp turn. Let's peel back the layers on that grand public vision and take a hard look at the actual near-term economic strategy. This is what we're calling the Great Export Switch, where we see a promise for Canada become a reality for Europe. First, get a load of this number, 66 gigawatts. This is the massive long-term wind-west potential that's been thrown around. I mean, that is a figure so huge, it could theoretically power almost a third of Canada. It's a number designed to capture the imagination, for sure. But here comes the reality check. The actual concrete goal, it's not 66 gigawatts, it's 5. The government's real aim is to license just 5 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. So you see, there is a massive gap between the grand vision and the immediate plan. And it gets even more specific than that. To get itself off coal and meet its own 2030 climate targets, Nova Scotia only needs about 2 gigawatts of new clean power. So why on earth are they planning to build more than double what their own grid actually requires? Which, of course, leads us to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? If the province only needs 2 gigawatts for its own people, what is the plan for the other 3 gigawatts of capacity they're rushing to build? Where is all that energy actually going? And boom, this slide lays it all out. That extra power, it's not for Nova Scotians. It's dedicated to private facilities that are going to convert it into green hydrogen and ammonia, load it onto ships, and send it straight to high-demand markets like Germany. Why? Because for the private developers, the Canadian market is just too small to justify the cost. But this whole export-focused plan, it seems to be resting on a very, very shaky foundation. There are some huge infrastructure and logistical challenges that honestly put the entire venture at risk. Just take a look at the ports. Right now, not a single one of Nova Scotia's ports is equipped to handle a project of this scale. The upgrades needed are massive and incredibly costly, but the real issue is the time. The development timeline is estimated at up to 9 years. That puts them past their 2030 project deadline before they can even really get started. That is a major, major bottleneck. And on top of that, you have to remember, this project doesn't exist in a vacuum. There's fierce global competition for the exact things they need: turbines, specialized installation vessels, skilled labor, you name it. Any shortage or delay in that global supply chain could completely derail their timeline and their budget. This right here, this slide, shows a fundamental flaw in the physics of the whole plan. It's kind of wild. As you can see, you start with 100% of the energy from the wind turbines. But with every single step, converting it to hydrogen, then to ammonia, then shipping it overseas, you lose energy. By the time it's actually delivered, you could be left with as little as 26% of what you started with. It's just an incredibly inefficient way to move power around the world. All this inefficiency and all this risk, it brings us to the most critical part of the story: the money. Who is actually bankrolling this high-stakes gamble, and who is bearing the risk for these private export projects? Well, the short answer is the Canadian public. Let this number just sink in for a second. $10 billion. That's the estimated price tag just for the offshore transmission lines needed to get the power to shore. An investment of this size is only being considered economically rational because of the huge private demand from those hydrogen exporters. It's public infrastructure, plain and simple, being built to serve private industrial needs. And taxpayers are funding this from all sides. We're talking about federal investment tax credits, long-term low-interest loans from the Canada Infrastructure Bank, and provincial revenue models. It's a whole web of public subsidies all designed to make these private ventures profitable. And this slide really shows the imbalance perfectly. On one side, you have the province making sure it gets its revenue through fixed fees and levies. They get paid no matter what happens. And on the other side, you've got the ratepayer, the regular citizen, who is facing the very real risk of footing the bill for infrastructure that primarily benefits private exporters, not their own local grid. And hey, if there was any doubt left about who's expected to carry the risk, well, here it is in black and white. This is an official government directive to the regulator. It's a request to lower the liability limits for the developers. They are explicitly asking to reduce the financial responsibility of private companies for any environmental or operational disasters. So, what does lowering liability actually mean in the real world? It means transferring risk. It means that if something goes terribly wrong, an environmental disaster, a catastrophic operational failure, the financial burden could fall not on the multinational developers who caused it, but on the public and on local industries like fishing that have depended on these waters for generations. Which brings us to our final question. When you look at the huge gap between the public promise and the export reality, when you see the systemic risks, the massive public costs, and this direct transfer of liability, you just have to ask, is this plan really about building a green future for Nova Scotia, or is it about using public money to guarantee private profits for an export market? Thank you for listening to the Rant Files by General Will. Be sure to check your sources and be sure to subscribe.